Having a more secure attachment style in relationships brings so many good things. It allows you to feel good about yourself and others, create stable, emotionally safe relationships, and it also allows you to feel emotionally closer to people, but also emotionally independent in the best way. So, how can you develop a more secure attachment style as an adult? That's what we're talking about on today's show. And I really wanted to discuss this topic because over the last few years, I've been just so pleased to see more in the air about the subject of attachment. The concept of attachment styles and relationships is finally getting the recognition and the discussion that it deserves because our attachment styles really have a big impact on the outcomes, but also on the quality of our relationships with other people. And what I've seen is that there's quite a bit now of discussion related to understanding attachment differences. Am I avoidant? Am I anxious? Take the quiz, right? Which is all positive. But I haven't seen a lot of information about how to move from one end or the other of that attachment spectrum towards the center, which is really the goal for all of us, is cultivating a more secure attachment style. And it's important to do this because what we know is that people who have more fundamentally secure attachment styles or who have done the work to develop these abilities over the years tend to have not just more satisfying relationships, but easier ones. Relationships tend to be less reactive and also just less turbulent and kind of like more emotionally free. So that's why I wanted to create a podcast on the subject for you today, because we're going to be talking about how to, first of all, identify your default setting attachment style, and then learn how to very intentionally and deliberately cultivate a more secure way of being in your most intimate relationships. And so, the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. Certainly, we talk about love. We're going to be talking about love today. We're also, though, going to be talking a lot about happiness and also growth on an individual level. Because one of the things that's so important to know about cultivating secure attachment is what it really involves: learning how to create a secure, loving, and emotionally safe relationship with yourself. And this is a lot of work. People with secure attachment styles treat themselves like a wise, loving parent would treat a beloved child. This is deep work with a lot of opportunity for growth and healing. And it all starts with you. Having better relationships with other people is like the cherry on top. It is one of the delightful outcomes of this work. But if you do this work, you will have other benefits for yourself personally, no matter what's going on in your world relationally. So, to support our conversation today, I've prepared a number of things for you. I will also add that if you are a regular podcast listener, I have taken the show on the road. I am now doing these on YouTube. I'm putting together little presentations for you every time, and I hope you come and hang out with me on YouTube sometime if you would like. We can sit in my office together and talk about all of the things. If you're a first-time listener, I'm Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a board-certified coach, and I'm also the founder of Growing Self Counseling and Coaching. I'm a clinical supervisor to other therapists, which I adore. And I also have the great privilege of having served as a therapist and coach and marriage counselor to countless people over the years, as well as hosting this podcast for you, which I really love. This podcast is for growth-oriented people like you to cultivate more love, happiness, and success in your life. So better relationships, personal well-being, and life satisfaction, but also success, like feeling though you were doing what you were put on this earth to do. You are actualizing your mission. That's my definition of success. So I have some tips and advice to help you with that as well. Let's dive in. Thank you, those of you who have gotten in touch with me recently through social media, Facebook, Instagram. Can track me down at Lisa Marie Bobby there. I've loved hearing your questions. And one of the reasons that I wanted to make a podcast on this topic is that attachment and attachment styles and how to navigate attachment issues in relationships have been very much on your mind. I have gotten a lot of questions and comments from you guys recently through social media, also in the comment section of the blog at growingself.com, from those of you who are noticing the impact of different attachment styles on your relationships. Maybe you've been noticing avoidant or anxious tendencies either in yourself or in your partner. But the question that then comes up is, okay, great. I understand that we have these attachment differences, but now what? And because that's really the $1,000,000,000 question, isn't it? I think oftentimes the way that attachment styles are presented to us is that that's just who we are, right? These ways of being that are baked into the bread. And it's true. By the time we are 3, most of us do have our attachment styles pretty firmly in place, and they do tend to endure. I mean, our early life experiences develop tendencies towards different ways of relating to others, and for good reasons. I mean, the things that we learn in our early life, particularly from our caregivers, do shape our self-concept. They teach us what we can expect from other people, and they also inform our awareness of who we are. They impact our relationships with ourselves. And as children, we all develop coping strategies. I mean, even very young children, we learn what we need to do in order to maintain our physical and emotional safety and also our connections with other people. And that's why whenever we talk about attachment work, it is longer term work because these things go really deep. And the good news here, though, is that it's also true that we are all capable of growth and healing and positive change. I mean, I wouldn't be here with you and with my clients week after week if I didn't believe that with all my heart and soul. And I am also here today to tell you that I have personally witnessed and participated in attachment style shifts with many clients over the years, moving towards a more secure and stable attachment style. So I don't want to oversell this and make it sound easier than it is because, again, it's not. But I do want you to know that hope and change are definitely possible, particularly when you are, like you, a growth-oriented person. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you weren't. And just, the virtue that you're here with me today is telling me that you're interested in learning and growing and maybe even ready to accept the responsibility for your own growth process. You're here to figure out your patterns, right? So I think that that is fantastic. And again, this is what we all need to do to grow and evolve and heal and become hopefully the very best versions of ourselves. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different things today. Be ready to take notes. And also, feel free to share this episode with people that you love. So, for example, maybe you're listening to this podcast and you've already done a lot of this work, or you have the privilege of being someone who had their needs met in early childhood and you have a more secure attachment style, but perhaps you know somebody who didn't have that privilege and who hasn't done this work yet. So think about who in your universe might benefit from hearing this. We do this in a spirit of collective generosity. But anyway, I have so much to share with you, and let's dive in. So the first thing we'll do, I'll give you a little brief refresher on the different kinds of attachment styles, just because it bears repeating, but also it will create a shared vocabulary and understanding for us that will support the rest of our conversation today. And so what we think of as an attachment style is essentially the fundamental core, intrinsic, instinctive way of relating to ourselves and with other people that comes from the quality of our earliest attachment bonds. Um, and I also just want to say that it's not solidified by the time you're 5 years old, right? I mean, obviously, very early childhood experiences have a deep impact. And there can also be things that impact our attachment styles that happen to us in later childhood, adolescence, and even young adulthood. If you've been bullied in childhood or maybe had even an abusive or toxic relationship as a young adult, it doesn't go quite as deep, but it can still shape the way that you show up in relationships and how you feel towards other people. And so, one of the reasons why attachment is so powerful when it comes to our earliest relationships is that in very early childhood, I mean, babies develop a sense of self that comes from their reflection of themselves as is communicated to them by other people. So, in their relationships with parents or caregivers or other people that they spend a lot of time with, all these experiences, these little micro moments, they all accumulate to create this set of expectations about, oh, this is what a human is, and this is what a relationship feels like. So the happy path here, and the one that I think we all want and honestly deserve, is to have gotten core needs met fairly consistently by our caregivers in early infancy and all the way forward. Wanting to say out loud right now for all you parents out there, you do not have to be a perfect parent by any stretch of the imagination to help your child grow into a securely attached adult. We all just have to be good enough. And good enough means that we are, generally speaking, kind, emotionally safe, responsive. We are able to see what our children are feeling, experiencing, and then reflect that back to them in an emotionally safe way. And also, especially with young children, allow them to use our emotional regulation system in order to become soothed, right? When that happens over and over again, when there's responsiveness, when there's comfort, when there's emotional safety, that develops this very strong core. You don't need anything else in some ways. So what this means is that people who have a secure or secure-ish attachment style have really had a lot of privilege in their lives. And I say privilege because it is. It is a hidden, silent, unrecognized, but very real privilege of having been treated well by other people, particularly when they were little, particularly when they depended on other people for everything. The people with secure attachment styles typically had at least one good enough caregiver or somebody that they were bonded to. Again, not perfect, but they've had hopes, fears, dreams, needs, needed comfort, and that was appropriately responded to. But also to have that kind of emotional attunement with a caregiver can be somebody like being excited about the things that they're excited about, right? It's just this emotional connection from somebody who values them. It's just this overall emotional environment in which they were raised that communicated to them that they were important, they were worthy of love and respect and care. So when a little kid grows up in an environment where they're sad, maybe they're crying or they're scared, and someone just picks them up and comforts them and is nice to them, isn't mean to them, isn't scary, isn't unavailable or inconsistent, you're checked out. What this child learns is I am a fundamentally good person. I'm worthy of love and respect because of how I'm being treated by the people around me. And again, what's very important is that we also develop our self-concept through these early experiences. Again, going back to those mirror neurons and that responsiveness, we develop empathy for ourselves when other people are empathetic towards us, when other people name our feelings as little children. That's how we learn what feelings are. And when we learn how to be activated, we get upset and we get calmed back down in the presence of someone who loves us. That's how we develop the ability to regulate our own emotions. And there's a lot of science behind this. You can Google mirror neurons and get a face full of all the everything if you want to learn more. But it's these just small moments, this reflected back sense of self that communicates to a child, I'm good, all is well, and I am safe around other humans. And that's a positive thing. So that is the baseline of secure attachment. And it's also true that, unfortunately, not all of us have that privilege of being raised in an environment where we got all of those things. I will also just say right here that attachment styles exist on a spectrum. If you can imagine a bell curve, most people are somewhere in the middle of the attachment spectrum. Maybe a little bit towards one side, maybe a little bit towards the other, but most of the time things were good enough that they're fairly close to the center. If people were raised in a more neglectful or inconsistent or frightening environment, they will be further along the sides of that bell curve. They will be farther away from the center. And that's when you see actual attachment issues start to pop up in relationships. So it's important to understand what it means to have the life experience, but also the internal experience of a secure attachment, because that's what we want to move towards, particularly not just when it comes to relationships, but the emotional regulation abilities that comes with it, the sense of internal resilience and a sense of identity, I think, really at the core, because that is one of the biggest and most important aspects of secure attachment is an emotional regulation system that, not that securely attached people don't get as upset as everybody else, but it means they can feel all the feelings, but it doesn't feel like they're falling apart, like existentially. And because they had support in soothing when they were much younger, they now have the ability to soothe themselves, calm back down, and trust emotions come and go. That's all right. It's not catastrophic. And that is one of the biggest and most important things that securely attached people are bringing to the table in their relationships with others. First of all, they tend to have fairly positive expectations of other humans, right? If there is a neutral situation, their default will be, well, they were probably just tired or forgot. It's all okay. They can give other people the benefit of the doubt, right? Whereas if you have a more pronounced attachment style, either towards avoidance or anxiety, you will interpret neutral things that other people do as potentially being unsafe or hurtful. So that's one thing to watch out for. But also because securely attached people tend to feel safe with other people and can regulate their own emotions, it's easier for them to have empathy for other people. They can be curious about other people and more emotionally aware because their feelings are safe. They're not being on the inside, flooded with big feelings or fleeing into numbness because they can understand and regulate their own emotions, which creates margin, right? Space to notice how other people are feeling and then respond to them in empathetic ways. That's where the foundations of empathy come from. They've been treated with empathy, they feel calm, so therefore they give other people the benefit of the doubt and less emotionally reactive in relationships because their fundamental worth as a person, their personal safety doesn't depend on what someone else does or doesn't do because they're okay on the inside. So, when it comes to understanding different attachment styles, so people who are further away from the center, either towards avoidance or towards anxiety, they have had some different life experiences. And also, they are having a different internal experience than securely attached people are. So let's shift. And we're going to be talking about when you have somebody who has an anxious attachment style. They have often had life experiences with caregivers early in life or in formative years where people were inconsistently loving. So they did have closeness, they did have a connection, but it wasn't secure. Maybe it was conditional, like they had to perform or be extra amazing in order to get love and attention from their parent. Or maybe their parent was fundamentally caring, but had their own emotional problems, which made them self absorbed or sometimes checked out. Maybe they had a parent with a intermittent substance use disorder, like so sometimes they got their needs met and sometimes they didn't. But what it means is that this young person had to work pretty hard to get their parents' attention, but also to maintain that attention. And there's always a fear of abandonment, being left, being alone, right? So, certainly, this can create an internal, like, yearning for validation, reflection, to be seen, to be comforted, to have that caregiver present, right? And so, with an anxious attachment style, what shows up in adulthood, they did not have what they needed in order to be able to develop these core self soothing capabilities because the people that they needed to do that with weren't always there. So, because of that, they can have a much harder time regulating their own emotions and will frequently be looking to other people to regulate their emotions for them. They may feel that their feelings are really big, scary, overwhelming, don't know what to do with them. And so, to feel comfort, they start trying to reach out to other people. Validate me, love me, tell me I'm good enough, tell me you're here, tell me you won't leave me, tell me I'm okay. And so it's like a lot of this I need a reflected sense of self-worth coming from other people because they didn't get enough of that when they were young. And again, we're not parent blaming here because, as I mentioned at the beginning, we can also develop anxiety in relationships if even later in life there was rejection or abandonment by a partner in the past. So that's just this like fundamental instability. I'm afraid you're going to disappear, or that you won't love me as much as I love you, or you're going to betray me. Just a lot of anxiety. And so, as you can imagine, this creates a lot of instability in relationships because, quite frankly, it's a lot of pressure to be in a relationship with somebody who has a highly anxious attachment style. Somebody who's always like, are you okay? Are we okay? How do you feel right now? Are you mad at me? All of this stuff is coming from their own anxiety and they need a lot of reassurance. And it can be difficult for them to trust. Like, are you cheating on me? Do you still love me? You were looking at her. What's going on? And so, this heightened kind of vigilance about getting needs met from other people, plus difficulty in regulating their own emotions, it can create a lot of reactivity in relationships and conflict, actually. Um, but again, I mean, we're talking about one of the steep sides of that bell curve. And I want to normalize some of this for a second because one of my fears with all of the discussion on attachment styles in the zeitgeist lately, which again, overall is a really good thing, I think it does risk creating psychopathology around what are many times fairly normal and expected human feelings. I mean, we all feel nervous in relationships sometimes. We can all feel insecure or want validation for other people or have a hard time calming ourselves down and need some reassurance. I mean, that's like part of the human experience. When it is more pronounced, though, like further out on the ends, it is because there has been a history that matches that, either with emotional needs not getting met consistently or like betrayal trauma along the line. Like it makes sense in terms of the story. And also, it's pretty pervasive. So, if we can go towards the other side of the hill now and talk about an avoidant attachment style, people with significant avoidant attachment styles also did not get what they needed at critical stages of their emotional or psychological development. At the most extreme ends of this, they grew up with people who were fundamentally not safe. They may have had parents or caregivers who were dangerous or fundamentally incapable of taking care of them in basic ways. So the memo that they got through those early life experiences was, I am on my own and I cannot trust other people to meet my needs, but also I can't trust them to be emotionally safe. And so, in order to protect myself, I am not going to get close to people. I am not going to open myself up to being harmed by others. And I am also going to shut down a lot of my emotions so that I don't actually feel anything. I'm just fine and I don't need you anyway. Like that is the internal experience of somebody with a highly avoidant attachment style. And it makes a lot of sense. It's very self protective because if you're someone who grew up in a legitimately dangerous or neglectful environment, that was a very wise, important, and effective survival strategy. So you did a good job. And as you can imagine, if people are arriving into adulthood with a more extreme attachment style, it shows up as being very self contained, right? And these are people who often appear very confident and charismatic and resilient and sure of themselves, right? But also maybe a tendency to be kind of self focused, sort of an island, to the point where it's difficult to create empathetic relationships with other people because they themselves didn't get empathy, right? So they struggle to be sensitive to the needs, rights, feelings of others. And they also frequently don't really feel a whole lot on the inside. And so if you're not connected with your own feelings, it's difficult to be emotionally attuned to what somebody else might be feeling because like it doesn't compute almost. Another thing about people with fairly pronounced avoidant attachment styles is that they tend to have fairly perfectionistic orientations toward themselves, actually, but also towards others, which is a self-protective factor too. So like I've worked with highly avoidant people in the past, and they had a lot of perfectionism towards their partners. Like nobody's ever good enough. They would have fantasies about perfect love. Like if I could meet the right person, then I could feel close and connected and all these things. But like fantasy people are safe. Actual humans who are challenging and weird and annoying and not perfectly gratifying all the time, that's a no thank you. And it's what happens is it develops into this pattern of just rejecting other people and really doing so in order to restore their own comfort. Because again, anything like emotional intimacy or vulnerability or heaven forbid, actually depending on another human in a vulnerable way can feel so threatening that it's like this visceral reaction. I mean, even like physically uncomfortable when there's too much intimacy that leads them to distance, like even like leaving the environment in order to regain their emotional equilibrium, which I'm sure as you can imagine is not a helpful thing in a long-term relationship. But again, there is a spectrum here, and this occurs at the most severe ends of the spectrum. So somebody who has survived childhood abuse or neglect or foster care, like the stories match, right? So that's what like the pointy end of the avoidant attachment style looks like. But you will also see a milder version of this for somebody who had parents who were maybe, by all appearances, things were okay on the surface, but they were emotionally dangerous, like low empathy people who tended to lash out or get really angry or be extremely critical. The message that that sends to a little kid is, I can't show you how I feel. If I need help, I cannot come to you, because if I do, I will get in trouble or you'll yell at me. So next time I have a problem, I'm going to fix it myself because I don't want to come to you with that. And so again, it just turns into the self-concept of, I am just fine on my own, and I maybe have this longing to be close to other people, but the actual experience of being around other humans is not that comfortable for me. So this is just an overview of attachment styles. And I hope as I was talking through this, you were thinking about where you probably fall on that spectrum. And also, if you're partnered with somebody who is at one of those more extreme sides of the spectrum, that can also be really helpful to know. So, with that in mind, we're going to talk now a little bit more deeply about how to begin cultivating this internal experience of secure attachment. That is the foundation on which we stand to be able to meet somebody else effectively from this kind of place. So, going more deeply into secure attachment and how it shows up on the inside. As we were talking about in the beginning of this episode, it can really be boiled down to a few things, right? Securely attached people on the inside are experiencing themselves as being fundamentally good and lovable. They are experiencing other people as being fundamentally good and loving. They tend to feel safe, valued, and loved in their interactions with other people. And they have this strong ability to be able to regulate their own emotions. So, if you would like to work towards these things as an adult, it's going to require a significant amount of personal growth work that is best done with a really good licensed therapist, ideally one who specializes in attachment psychology and who really has a deep understanding of attachment styles and how they impact us. So, to begin moving in this direction, to move towards the center, we first need to focus on how to be an emotionally safe person for ourselves, which is, how do I talk to myself? How do I support myself? If you are aware of having a highly critical inner voice that is telling you all the time about how crappy you are and all the things you did wrong and that's beating you up all the time, that is a good indication that there's some work to do here, because really cultivating self-love and that secure relationship with yourself, again, is a foundationally important piece of developing secure attachment with others. I'll refer you back to another podcast that I did on this topic, how to love yourself. You can find it on my website, growingself.com. You will go to the blog and podcast section, and then from there, you can find the personal growth content collection, which discusses how to develop self-love. But it's really intentionally cultivating a more compassionate and gentle relationship with yourself, where you are able to feel your feelings and practice managing them, soothing yourself through that self-talk, that relationship with yourself, so that your inner voice becomes something like, yes, I'm feeling scared and threatened right now, and I am okay. I know that I tend to feel this way in relationships. I know this is an artifact of my childhood, and these feelings aren't something that I need to act on. Here's how I know that I'm safe. It's like this dialogue inside of themselves. And this is critically important. So, if this is a struggle for you, one of my first pieces of advice is that if you want to have better relationships with other people that feel more securely attached, this is where to start. Again, with the support of a really good therapist. The other thing that is important to learn how to do is to practice incrementally and in safe ways, trusting other people and talking yourself through any fears that you might have about whether or not they are good or good enough if you're prone towards an avoidant attachment style, right? And again, this is important work to do with a therapist because it's so ingrained and automatic. It comes up and it's like a blind spot for people. So you might not even be aware of it in yourself. But if you have a relationship with a good therapist who knows you well, they will be able to reflect that back to you in a safe way and help you test whether or not you are actually in a safe relationship. So, to understand that you're having an emotional flare up and, like, you know what? I am with somebody who loves me. This person is usually emotionally safe. These are the ways that they're committed to me. I can be close to this person and nothing bad is going to happen to me. I can be in an intimate relationship with an imperfect person and still trust them to be good enough. And like, again, these aren't going to be conscious thoughts in the beginning, but the degree to which you can have corrective emotional experiences with another human, and like, I feel anxious or afraid, and oh, I'm okay. Like that's how it heals. There is a particular kind of couples counseling that can facilitate your doing this work with a partner, if that's something that is of interest to you. It's called emotionally focused couples therapy, and it's all about helping couples create a secure, safe, and stable attachment bond between them that deals very directly with those attachment bonds and how we understand and have empathy for and respond to each other in ways that heal attachments. But to go through this process, especially with a partner, and experience them as being safe and responsive in these deep, visceral ways, these old attachment wounds can be healed over time. So even if that wasn't the hand that you got dealt at an earlier point in your life. And another thing that is incredibly important to be focusing on if you would like to develop a more secure attachment style is the ability to regulate your own emotions, which means that you develop the competencies inside of yourself to, first of all, understand how you're feeling, stay in the ring with your own feelings without getting so flooded that it feels catastrophic and out of control, or so emotionally shut down that you're disconnected from your feelings, right? We want to come back to the center, but then also develop strategies to be able to manage these effectively. In my experience, one of the best and most important ways of developing these skills is through either emotional intelligence coaching and or combined with cognitive behavioral techniques. So essentially, CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy helps you develop a different internal dialogue that is much more positive and self-supportive, combined with behavioral strategies that help you just develop skills to soothe yourself, calm down, regulate your feelings, because the degree that you can do those things is going to translate into the degree that you feel safe and secure and calm in your relationships and less reactive to your partner, either chasing them around, trying to get validated and get your needs met emotionally by another person, getting your partner to help soothe your anxiety, or less reactive in the sense that if you're starting to feel uncomfortable or flooded due to the closeness, you'll be able to calm yourself down from that too, so that you can stay in the ring with somebody rather than feeling like you gotta skedaddle. The goal of this kind of work is to really become extremely self aware and develop a different kind of relationship with yourself that allows you to manage the avoidant or anxious tendencies in a much more active way. And to support this, there's actually a kind of therapy that I love. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy. And what this means is that it honors the fact that we have feelings. These are like automatic responses. But acceptance and commitment therapy can help you become extremely mindful and self aware of what's going on inside of you and where it comes from. And it also helps you develop a lot more self compassion. Like, it makes sense that I feel the way I do in these situations because I wasn't safe at an earlier stage of my life. So it's hard for me to feel safe now. Like, that's a very compassionate inner voice. But what acceptance and commitment therapy goes into is like, there's a strong mindfulness component. Like, how can I feel what I'm feeling in this moment without having to react to it, without having to frantically try to change it by either grabbing onto somebody else or distancing myself? So it is mindfulness and acceptance of whatever I'm feeling in the moment, but then a commitment to showing up like the person that I want to be in my relationships as an adult. So it's very, I think, validating. It's, again, not about trying to change the way that you feel necessarily, because particularly with pronounced attachment styles, it might not change that much. However, doing this work is going to help you be more committed to living from your values and staying connected to who you wish to be in the world and in your relationships, and acquiring the ability to manage yourself in such a way that you're not acting out in ways that are destructive for your relationship. So it's a lot of personal responsibility that comes, just being able to manage your own emotions so that they're not spilling over with all your stuff onto other people in ways that are to the detriment of their well-being. Again, because it helps you get connected to your values around love and emotional safety and connection. So this is a wonderful approach to check out that will help you develop a relationship with yourself, and also the self-awareness and personal responsibility that can help you continue to heal and grow. I just want to say out loud that I think we all need to release the idea that by working on ourselves, we are going to change the way that we feel sometimes. I think that there's this myth, this fantasy that if we do therapy or if we do a lot of personal growth work, we won't experience dark emotions anymore. And that isn't true. What the work really involves is becoming very self aware and then being able to make conscious choices about how we manage those internal feelings effectively so that we can calm back down and behave lovingly towards ourselves and other people. So the path of growth is getting a lot of that self-awareness and management. It's really only by getting super clear about how your attachment tendencies show up inside of you, how they feel, how they make you think, what they make you do, that is the path of liberation, right? So to dive in, just to give you a roadmap of where this might go and what to pay attention to, if you have become aware that you have avoidant tendencies, it's going to be really, really important for you to become very just self-aware about what it looks like and feels like inside of you when these become activated. And this can be challenging to work on because oftentimes people with avoidant attachment styles, the fundamental orientation is to be less relational. I mean, somebody with an anxious attachment style, they're going to be very oriented towards others, like very focused. But people with an avoidant attachment style, you might not have the same drive to connect with other humans. And without that, there's less motivation to work on these parts of yourself. So, that in itself can be an obstacle to be aware of on the path of growth. You might just feel much fundamentally more comfortable being alone or being in much more distant relationships or being in multiple relationships at the same time. That can be a coping style. And that is all right as long as it feels healthy and good for you. But that would also be something just to talk through with a good therapist who can make sure that you are making self-aware informed decisions about how you want to live your life, that you're moving towards something that feels good for you as opposed to having like this reactive moving away from something kind of experience that's getting you into unhealthy situations. But working with a good therapist can also help you gain some awareness around what happens internally and even the thought process that can go along with this. Like if you are in a relationship, but often find yourself like thinking or fantasizing about other people, that can be an indication that avoidance is flaring up. And you might also notice a tendency in yourself to just cycle through lots of different relationships, searching for that perfect person. Or if you become aware that you experience any conflict in relationships as being highly negative, to the point where it's like you can't function in the relationship, like you cannot tolerate an emotionally charged conversation, that would be something to talk about with a therapist. And again, like this self awareness and self acceptance is really, really important. And also to have compassion around it. And if you decide that you really don't want to have the kind of close relationships with other people that they seem to want with you, that is completely fine. Again, but it is important for you to say that out loud to people that you're getting involved with so that they can make informed decisions about whether or not they want to be in a relationship with you. And so they can make choices for themselves and just have a clear awareness of what is possible. Because again, to be in a relationship with somebody and for you to know that you're never going to be who and what they want, it's important to say that again so that they can choose if they want to maintain a relationship with you. However, if you are aware that you want to have different kinds of relationships in your life, that you want to be the kind of person that can be close to people and have them experience you as being attentive and responsive and loving, I mean, that is fantastic. And that right there is your motivation to work on this. The path forward is becoming hyper aware of your avoidance stuff. When it gets triggered, how you start to feel. Here's what I start telling myself about the situation and this person. And this is when I start fantasizing about other people or listing in my head all the reasons why this relationship won't work and it never worked. It never will, right? To be able to say, this is an artifact from my adverse childhood experiences, and I cannot listen to this. I need to calm myself down and feel, like I'm putting myself back together again, talk myself through the fact that this is the person that I want to be with. This is a fundamentally safe relationship with me. And I need to show up in a way that is loving and responsive to my partner. And here's what that looks like. I know I didn't get that when I was a kid, but I can learn how to do it as an adult. So that is how we move from avoidant to more secure. And then on the other side of this, to recognize that you have anxious attachment tendencies and wish to work towards that middle ground in your relationships, there is a roadmap here for you too. And when you're moving from anxious to secure, that involves, again, a lot of the same things. It's like becoming highly aware of how does this show up in my life when I am getting triggered and when I'm getting scared and flooded? How do I know that that's happening to me so that I can take action in order to calm myself down and not do anything damaging to the relationship? So, if you think back through like most of your relationships that you've been in with other people, if you tend to experience others as being emotionally unavailable or not meeting your needs, that is a sign that you might have anxious tendencies and you may have these things flaring up inside of you and that they're worthy of your attention. And it's also true that if you had relationships with early caregivers who were not consistently available and who didn't always meet your needs. Freud would say that you seek to have relationships with people who were like those original caregivers so that you can work through that as an adult. They feel familiar, right? And it's also true that if you have an anxious attachment style, you can be in a relationship with a fundamentally highly secure person who is emotionally available, who is there for you, who is responsive, and you will still not experience them that way because it's not about them. The key here is self awareness, and it is just becoming very mindful of how that anxiety manifests inside of you, experiencing partners as emotionally unavailable, and not just one. I mean, you may certainly have a relationship with an emotionally unavailable person. You may have a relationship with somebody who has a highly avoidant attachment style. It's amazing how those two different kinds of people can find each other because it feels familiar, right? But it's like all of the relationships, you're never quite getting enough from any of the people that you're with. That's something to pay attention to because the fact is that if you have a highly anxious attachment style, you can be with the most smushy, secure, like loving, responsive person in the world, and it still won't manage the anxiety that you feel inside of yourself because nobody can. It's not coming from what your partner is doing or not doing. It's coming from the way that you feel on the inside. And once you recognize that and learn how to manage it, that's when everything can change in your relationship. Other things to watch out for if you suspect that you may have an anxious attachment style is just this really pronounced need to like rely on other people to regulate your own anxiety that can, quite frankly, look like a lot of anger, reactivity, demanding things from other people, or even like actually being pretty controlling. Like, I need my partner to be at home at 10 o'clock and he has to text me at these times, or otherwise I will rah. People who are very anxious in relationships will often try to manage their anxiety by controlling other people in efforts to soothe themselves. And so the path forward here is to change this. Be aware of it when you're having these flare ups, and a new conversation with yourself is like, okay, this is my stuff. This is what I do. This is my responsibility. And so, thanks to the work that I've been doing with my therapist, I am going to deploy some of those strategies to soothe myself, calm myself down, sit with these feelings mindfully, remind myself that I'm okay. I'm loving, I'm lovable, I'm safe in the world, all the things. And that in order for me to be a good partner to this person and show up in this relationship the way that I want to, I can't jump all over them and accuse them of things or yell at them for not saying the right thing to me or in the right tone, right? Because that is me doing hurtful things to them in efforts to manage my own anxiety. And it also, I mean, if you don't do that, it creates a self fulfilling prophecy, this relationship dynamic where the person on the other side is like, whoa, stop. Why are you being so aggressive with me? Because that will damage your relationship. So it's very important to learn how to do this manual override, right? When you're aware of how you feel and shift into, okay, here's how I want to show up because rationally, I know that this is a good person. I can trust them. They're not doing anything to me, but this is old programming that I need to manage right now. And then you can show up in the way that you want to be, in a way that strengthens your relationship. They will then respond positively to that, and you'll get more like concrete information about the strength and health of your relationship. And that in itself will also be healing for you. You will still need to manage all of your things, but it'll be easier to do that because there will be less things happening in the relationship that will be triggering for you. So we talked about an awful lot. I do have a few more resources to leave you with before we wrap up for today. First of all, as we've discussed, I mean, really the path forward, if you want to develop a more secure attachment style, is recognition, being aware of what happens inside of you, what happens inside of your partner, what those reactions feel like, what they make you want to do, and also a lot of reflection. You can do some journaling to try to crack into this, but again, because this is oftentimes so like core and automatic, it can be difficult to get that reflection just from within yourself because it just feels true, right? So, to get connected with a really good attachment informed therapist can be incredibly helpful and healing, but also to have compassion for your process, knowing that there is a reason, a really good reason why you feel the way that you do. This isn't anything that you created, it isn't your fault, and it doesn't mean anything bad about you as a human if you're having these reactions. And this actually goes back to this safe relationship with yourself. The more responsive, compassionate, and caring you can be with yourself, the easier it will be for you to do this work and be able to heal through it. So just keep that in mind. I do also want to mention some additional resources that I have available for you. There's, again, that emotionally focused couples therapy is the way to do attachment work with your partner, if you'd like to try that, particularly if attachment issues have led to a distressed relationship. That's definitely the way to go. Also, do individual therapy along with couples therapy, ideally with a therapist who specializes in attachment work and who uses that acceptance and commitment based therapy that I was talking about. In order to find a good therapist to do this with, slow down and educate yourself before you jump into something. It's very easy to connect with a therapist these days, which is a good thing. Like, I'm glad that things are getting more accessible. And it has also become much easier to get involved with the wrong kind of therapist. And who you work with really matters, particularly with this kind of thing, and particularly with the fact that it's going to be a long-term relationship. I mean, your growth in this area will likely be measured in years. So it needs to be somebody that you feel really comfortable with. I have a couple of resources on my website. One is how to choose a good therapist so that you can learn like what kinds of qualifications to look for, what to avoid. There's another article that I have on evidence-based practices that would be really helpful for you to look at. I think particularly if you tend to have an anxious attachment style, it's going to be easy for you to idealize other people, right? And like, oh, they have a doctorate or whatever. They must know what they're doing. And I want you to be empowered going into this. So check out those resources, read them. And then when you start looking for therapists to work with, you'll know like what questions to ask and just, again, how to make empowered and informed decisions. If you feel that it would be helpful to do this work with your partner, I would invite you to check out How to Choose a Marriage Counselor so that you connect with somebody who's really has a solid understanding of these kinds of attachment cycles that we've been talking about, how they work together, and who can help you not just manage the attachment flare ups, but also behave with each other in interactive ways that support and strengthen the foundation of your relationship. Because the degree that you can do that, the safer and better you're going to feel in your relationships. And then, very lastly, there are more resources for you available on my website at growingself.com. You can check out the blog and podcast section of my website. I have recorded a number of podcast episodes on the subject of secure attachment styles, emotional regulation skills, learning how to trust yourself and trust others is a big piece of it. And also, I think developing the kind of emotionally healthy relationships that you want and deserve. So it is all there for you at growingself.com, and I hope you take advantage of all of it. Okay. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope that this conversation was helpful for you, and I'd love to hear how things go for you. So if you want to leave any comments or feedback or additional questions, you're welcome to drop those in the comments in YouTube, social media, or get in touch with me through my website. All right. Thanks so much.